in the soft glow of early spring at Hillside Nature Reserve, where the majestic Blue Ridge Mountains cradle a sanctuary of wild beauty, a moment of both incredible hope and utter shock unfolds. Rescued Bobcat, now affectionately named Willow, once a captive in unimaginable despair, now faces the miracle of motherhood. She is giving birth to her precious litter of 5. As the first 4 cubs arrived, healthy and strong, a wave of relief washed over the team. But then, the 5th brought an unforeseen twist, a heart-stopping surprise that no one could have ever predicted. A routine event, a natural wonder, suddenly turned extraordinary when the attending veterinarian witnessed a final birth that defied all expectations. An image so startling, so unexpected, it left the entire team in stunned silence. What emerged was more than just life. It was a revelation that would forever change how they viewed the incredible resilience of nature. Before we dive into this amazing story, hit that like button, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming heartwarming tales. The morning mist hung low, like a delicate veil, over Hillside Nature Reserve, nestled in the gentle foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in western Virginia. It was early April, and the forest was awakening from its long winter slumber. Wildflowers, in vibrant splashes of purple, yellow, and white, dotted the landscape, while the air vibrated with the melodious tunes of birdsong. This sprawling 200-acre sanctuary had been lovingly established 15 years prior by retired biology professor Eleanor Vance, a woman who had poured her entire life savings into preserving this precious piece of wilderness for generations to come. Among the many creatures that called Hillside home was Willow, a magnificent 4-year-old female bobcat with distinctive, elegant tufted ears and striking amber eyes that seemed to hold a universe of stories. Unlike most of the reserve's residents, Willow hadn't been born wild. Her story was one of heartbreaking captivity. She had been rescued 2 years earlier from an illegal exotic pet operation in Tennessee, where she had been kept in truly deplorable conditions, malnourished, terrified, and clinging to life. When the authorities finally raided the facility, they found Willow cowering in a rusty cage, barely large enough for her to even turn around. Dr. David Miller, the compassionate 55-year-old veterinarian who oversaw the medical care of all the animals at Hillside, remembered the day Willow arrived as if it were just yesterday. Her fur was matted and dull, her eyes vacant, filled with a fear that pierced his very soul. It had taken months of patient rehabilitation, proper nutrition, and gentle, loving handling before she even began to regain her natural behaviors and instincts. Though she would never be released back into the wild, her deep-seated fear of open spaces and lack of essential hunting skills made that an impossibility, a heartbreaking reality. She had gradually come to regard the reserve's spacious, naturalistic enclosure as her own territory. "She's come so far," David often remarked to his dedicated colleagues. One of those colleagues was 34-year-old wildlife specialist Ethan Bell, a former park ranger with a rugged appearance that beautifully belied his gentle and caring nature. Together, they had spent countless hours observing Willow's progress, meticulously documenting her recovery and ensuring her environment provided adequate enrichment, stimulating her mind and body. 6 months prior, the reserve had taken in another rescued bobcat, a young male named Ranger, who had been found orphaned but thankfully healthy near a logging site in West Virginia. After a careful and patient introduction period, Willow and Ranger had formed a tentative bond, their initial wariness slowly melting away, giving way to mutual grooming and shared napping spots under the warm sunlight. The staff had noticed the pair's increased affection during the cold winter months, but hadn't, in their wildest dreams, expected a pregnancy. Bobcats typically mate in February or March, with their adorable kittens arriving about 2 months later. By their calculations, if Willow was indeed pregnant, she shouldn't deliver until late May or early June. Yet, on this misty April morning, something was clearly, undeniably wrong. Ethan arrived at the reserve shortly after dawn for his usual rounds, a steaming thermos of black coffee clutched in his hand. As he approached Willow's enclosure, he immediately noticed her deeply concerning, unusual behavior. Instead of her typical routine of lounging regally on her favorite elevated platform or confidently patrolling the perimeter of her territory, she was pacing restlessly in the back corner of the habitat, frantically pawing at the soft bedding material inside the den box the staff had lovingly installed months earlier in anticipation of a possible future family. "Hey there, Willow," Ethan called softly, using the affectionate nickname the staff had given her. "What's going on, girl?" Willow, lost in her distress, completely ignored him, continuing her agitated pacing. Every few minutes, she would stop abruptly, crouch low to the ground, and emit a low guttural sound, almost a growl, but higher pitched and more plaintive, filled with an undeniable sense of urgency and pain. Deeply concerned, a knot of worry tightening in his stomach, Ethan pulled out his cell phone and called David. "I think you'd better come in early," he said, his voice laced with concern when the veterinarian answered. "Something's up with Willow. She's showing signs of distress, and I'm wondering if she might be going into labor." "Labor?" David sounded genuinely surprised, a hint of disbelief in his tone. "That can't be right. We estimated she wouldn't be due for at least another 6 weeks. I know, Ethan replied, his brow furrowed with worry. "But she's nesting. Her vocalization is different, and she's alternating between frantic pacing and assuming what looks unmistakably like a birthing position." There was a brief, tense pause on the other end of the line. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, David replied, his voice now filled with a sense of urgency. "In the meantime, alert the rest of the staff. If she is indeed in labor, especially this prematurely, we need to be absolutely prepared for anything." By the time David arrived, wearing a rumpled flannel shirt and faded jeans, his graying hair still damp from a hasty shower, Ethan had already set up a makeshift monitoring station near Willow's enclosure. The wildlife cameras that normally recorded her activities had been quickly repositioned to focus directly on the den box, and basic medical supplies were neatly arranged on a folding table, ready for immediate use. "Any changes?" David asked, accepting a much-needed cup of coffee from Jessica Reed, the reserve's dedicated 29-year-old education coordinator, who had arrived shortly after Ethan's frantic call. Her contractions seemed to be getting stronger and more frequent. Jessica replied, her voice tight with worry as she nervously pushed her thick-framed glasses up the bridge of her nose. "I've been timing them, about every 4 minutes now." David nodded grimly, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a serious focus. Premature labor in captive bobcats isn't uncommon, especially for first-time mothers who've experienced trauma. Let's just hope those precious kittens are developed enough to survive. The team watched with bated breath, their hearts pounding in their chests as Willow continued her laborious preparations, digging frantically at the bedding material, turning in endless circles, and occasionally emitting heart-wrenching yelps that echoed through the quiet morning air. Though they were all experienced wildlife professionals, there was something particularly poignant, deeply moving, about witnessing Willow's struggle. Perhaps because they knew her harrowing history, the unimaginable abuse she had suffered, and the remarkable resilience she had shown in her long and arduous recovery. Should we intervene? Jessica asked quietly, her voice trembling with barely contained concern. David shook his head firmly. Not unless absolutely necessary. Wild animals, even those in captivity, generally manage birth without human assistance. Our presence might cause her more stress, which could tragically complicate things. For now, we observe, we monitor, and we prepare for any potential emergency. As the morning wore on, more staff members arrived, drawn by urgent text messages about the unexpected and concerning development. By 10:30 a.m., a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance from the enclosure, their faces etched with worry and anticipation, their eyes glued to the den box. Then, at precisely 11:14 a.m., Honor Willow gave a final, powerful push, a surge of effort that seemed to shake her entire body, and the first kitten emerged. A tiny, wet bundle of dark fur, no larger than a human palm. The staff collectively held their breath, every heart in that small group pounding with a mixture of fear and hope, as Willow carefully cleaned her newborn, licking away the birth membrane and gently stimulating its tiny lungs to breathe. After what felt like an eternity, a lifetime of anxious waiting, the kitten emitted a feeble squeak, a tiny sound that sent a ripple of profound relief through the onlookers. "Good girl, Willow," Ethan murmured, his voice thick with emotion, tears welling in his eyes. "You're doing great, Mama." Over the next hour, 3 more kittens were born, each following the same incredible pattern. Willow's intense labor, the miraculous emergence of a small, damp form, and her immediate, thorough cleaning, her maternal instincts kicking in with unwavering strength. By early afternoon, 4 tiny bobcat kittens nestled safely against their mother's warm body, their wet fur gradually drying into the characteristic spotted pattern of their species. "A hug for 4 healthy kittens," David observed, making careful notes on his tablet, a small smile finally gracing his lips. "That's a good-sized litter for a bobcat. She seems to be handling motherhood remarkably well, especially considering her difficult background." But Willow wasn't finished. As the afternoon shadows began to lengthen, her restlessness returned, a subtle shift in her demeanor that sent a fresh wave of concern through the observing team. It became clear that another kitten was on its way. This labor, however, seemed different, more prolonged, and undeniably more difficult. Willow panted heavily, her sides heaving with visible exertion as she struggled to deliver the final member of her precious litter. "Something's wrong," David said, his experienced eyes catching the subtle but unmistakable signs of distress. "This one's taking far too long." After 30 agonizing minutes of increasingly labored pushing, the 5th kitten finally emerged. Even from their observation position, the staff could see that this one was different. It was noticeably smaller than its siblings, its tiny body almost translucent in its fragility. Most concerning of all, it wasn't moving. A collective gasp went through the onlookers, their hearts sinking with dread. "We need to intervene," David decided, his professional demeanor giving way to a palpable urgency. "That kitten needs help now." The delicate operation of separating a newborn kitten from its fiercely protective mother was fraught with risk. In the wild, mother bobcats are notoriously protective of their young, and even a hand-raised cat like Willow might react aggressively to perceived threats to her vulnerable offspring. But there was absolutely no choice. The tiny life, hanging precariously in the balance, demanded immediate action. Ethan, who had always shared the strongest rapport with Willow, bravely volunteered to enter the enclosure. Moving with deliberate slowness, speaking in a low, soothing voice, he approached the den box. "It's okay, Willow," he murmured gently. "We're here to help you. You're doing so well, girl." To everyone's utter amazement, Willow didn't growl or attempt to shield her kittens. Instead, she watched Ethan with what almost seemed like recognition, her amber eyes blinking slowly, a clear sign of trust in feline body language. When he reached towards the motionless fifth kitten, she even shifted slightly, as if making room for his hands. "I don't believe it," Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. She's letting him help. With infinite care and gentle hands, Ethan lifted the tiny kitten, cradling it against his chest as he carefully backed out of the enclosure. David was waiting anxiously at the door, his medical bag already open and ready. "Get it to the clinic immediately," he instructed, his voice firm but filled with concern. "Oxygen, warming pad, the works. I'll be right behind you." As Ethan hurried towards the reserve's small veterinary clinic, David turned to Jessica, his expression serious. "Keep a close watch on Willow and the other kittens. If she seems distressed about the missing one, let me know right away. We may need to return it, regardless of its condition." In the small clinic, a flurry of focused activity surrounded the tiny, fragile kitten. David's experienced hands moved with practiced efficiency as he gently cleared the little one's airways, administered life-giving oxygen, and placed it carefully on a warming pad. "Come on, little fighter," he murmured, his voice filled with a desperate hope as he worked tirelessly. "Your mama and siblings are waiting for you." For several heart-stopping moments that felt like an eternity, there was absolutely no response. Then, just as hope began to tragically fade, the kitten gave a weak, almost imperceptible twitch. A moment later, its tiny pink mouth opened in a silent gasp, and his chest began to rise and fall in shallow, fragile breaths. "We've got signs of life," David announced, unable to keep the elation from his voice, a wave of relief washing over him. "But we're not out of the woods yet." A closer, more thorough examination revealed the heartbreaking reason why the kitten had struggled so much during birth, and why it was now fighting so desperately for each breath. Unlike its healthy siblings, this tiny creature had a structural abnormality, a slight but significant deformity in its jaw and palate that would make nursing incredibly difficult, if not entirely impossible. "It's a congenital defect," David explained to Ethan, who hovered anxiously nearby, his eyes fixed on the tiny form that now squirmed feebly on the warming pad. Not uncommon in wildlife, especially in areas with environmental contaminants. "In the wild," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with sadness, "this little one wouldn't stand a chance." David's expression was guarded, realistic. "Here, with intensive care, tube feeding, and, until it's strong enough, corrective surgery, maybe. Just maybe." He sighed. "It's going to be a long road, though." "What about Willow?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Won't separating the kitten cause her significant distress?" "That's our other major challenge," David admitted. "Ideally, we'd want this little one to bond immediately with its mother and siblings. But it can't nurse effectively, and we can't risk it failing to thrive or preventing the others from getting the vital nourishment they need." The solution they painstakingly devised was a delicate compromise. A specially designed incubator was carefully placed just outside Willow's enclosure, positioned so that mother and fragile child could see and smell each other. maintaining that crucial connection, while the dedicated staff provided the tiny kitten with the specialized care it desperately needed. Jessica, who had been diligently monitoring Willow's behavior, reported that the mother bobcat had seemed momentarily confused and agitated by the missing kitten, but had quickly returned her attention to her 4 healthy offspring, her maternal instincts demanding she care for them. Still, she occasionally glanced towards the exit where Ethan had taken her 5th kitten, her ears pricked forward in what might have been a mother's worried concern. The days that followed established a new, demanding rhythm at Hillside Nature Reserve. The staff organized themselves into around-the-clock shifts to provide constant care for the fragile 5th kitten, whom they affectionately named Hope. The name seemed fitting for the tiny fighter. Tube feeding a newborn bobcat required immense skill, unwavering patience, and the gentlest touch. The specialized formula, carefully designed to mimic the rich nutrients of bobcat milk, had to be administered every 2 hours, day and night. Hope's weight was meticulously documented. Each precious gram gained celebrated as a significant victory. The incubator, kept at precisely the right temperature and humidity, became the center of everyone's attention, with staff members stopping by throughout the day to check on the little fighter's slow but steady progress. Eleanor Vance, the reserve's wise 72-year-old founder, took a particular interest in Hope's delicate case. Though her arthritis made it difficult for her to participate in the hands-on care, she often sat quietly beside the incubator, reading aloud from her beloved nature books in her soft, melodious voice. "My mother used to say that all creatures respond to stories," she told David one evening as they watched Hope sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. "I don't know if that's entirely true, but it certainly can't hurt to try." Meanwhile, Willow proved to be an incredibly attentive and devoted mother to her 4 healthy kittens, nursing them, grooming them with gentle care, and keeping them safely gathered in the cozy den box. The wildlife cameras captured truly touching moments of maternal care. Willow gently batting a wandering kitten back into the safety of the den, or patiently enduring the playful climbing antics of the more adventurous ones as they practiced their developing motor skills on her tolerant form. What surprised the staff most, however, was Willow's continued, unwavering interest in her absent 5th offspring. Several times a day, she would approach the mesh wall of her enclosure closest to where Hope's incubator was placed, sniffing the air with focused intensity and making soft, chirping sounds. The same tender vocalization she used to call her other kittens. "She knows," Ethan insisted, his voice filled with awe after witnessing this deeply moving behavior. "Somehow, she knows Hope is still alive and nearby." David was more cautious in his scientific interpretation. "It could be that she smells our scents mingled with her kittens, or it might simply be that her strong maternal instinct is telling her the count is off." Regardless of the exact explanation, the undeniable connection between mother and separated kitten became a powerful source of both hope and lingering concern for the dedicated staff. If Hope miraculously survived, would reintroduction to the litter even be possible? Would Willow fully accept a kitten that now smelled so strongly of humans and formula rather than her own natural milk? And perhaps most worryingly, would the healthy kittens, growing stronger and more active with each passing day, inadvertently harm their incredibly fragile sibling? These pressing questions took on an even greater sense of urgency as Hope reached the 2-week mark. She was still alive, a tiny miracle in itself, but struggling despite the team's tireless efforts. The kitten wasn't gaining weight as quickly as they had desperately hoped, and concerning episodes of respiratory distress had necessitated emergency interventions not just once, but twice. Urdio. We're reaching a critical decision point, David told the assembled staff during their weekly meeting, his expression grave. Hope desperately needs surgery to correct the palate issue, but it's undeniably risky at this incredibly young age and small size. Alternatively, we continue with our current intensive care, fully knowing that tube feeding is stressful for the kitten, and that each day of separation from Willow and her litter makes eventual reintegration significantly more challenging. The discussion that followed was passionate and heartfelt, but always respectful, with valid points raised on both sides. Some argued strongly for immediate surgery, citing the ongoing stress of continued tube feeding and the potential for complications. Others advocated for patiently waiting until hope was demonstrably stronger, even if that meant a longer and potentially more difficult separation from her mother and siblings. In the end, it was Jessica who offered a third, insightful perspective. "What if we try a partial reintroduction now?" she suggested tentatively, her eyes sparkling with a hopeful glint. "Supervised visits with Willow and the litter, while we continue the essential supplemental feeding. If Willow accepts Hope, and if the kitten shows improved well-being from the physical contact and maternal presence, it might help us make a more informed decision about the optimal timing for the delicate surgery." The proposal carried significant inherent risks, but it also beautifully acknowledged what many had observed, that both mother and separated kitten seemed to be experiencing a profound distress from their continued separation. After careful and thoughtful consideration, the team decided to cautiously try Jessica's innovative approach, with extensive precautions firmly in place to ensure both Hope's fragile safety and the continued well-being of the healthy, thriving kittens. The very first reintroduction attempt was scheduled for the early morning, a time when Willow was typically most calm and relaxed after her nighttime feeding. David, Ethan, and Jessica would all be present, with David ready to intervene medically at a moment's notice if necessary. Ethan prepared to manage Willow if she became unexpectedly aggressive, and Jessica meticulously documenting every single detail of the crucial interaction. As dawn broke over the reserve, painting the dewy grass with long, soft shadows, the trio gathered nervously outside Willow's enclosure. Hope, now a little bit stronger, but still alarmingly small compared to what a typical 3-week-old bobcat kitten should be, was cradled gently in a soft, warm towel in David's steady hands. "Remember," he cautioned, his voice low and serious, "we abort this attempt at the very first sign of rejection or any distress. Hope's safety is absolutely paramount." With a deep breath, Ethan carefully unlocked the enclosure door and stepped inside. Willow, who had been watching their preparations with evident interest, rose gracefully from her resting place beside her peacefully sleeping kittens and approached them, her movements deliberate, but thankfully not threatening. "Hey, Willow," Ethan greeted her softly, his voice calm and reassuring. "We've brought someone very special to see you." David followed slowly, keeping his body language open and non-threatening. When he was about 6 feet from Willow, he carefully unwrapped the towel, gently exposing Hope to her mother's view. The moment hung suspended in time, thick with anticipation. Willow stared intently at the tiny kitten, her striking amber eyes unblinking, her entire posture frozen, every muscle tense. The humans barely dared to breathe, ready to retreat at the slightest hint of aggression. Then, with a sound that was half soft chirp, half gentle purr, Willow closed the small distance between them. She sniffed delicately at Hope, her sensitive whiskers twitching as she processed the familiar scent of her own precious offspring. now mingled with the unfamiliar odors of human hands and medical supplies. For one heart-stopping moment, she opened her mouth near the fragile kitten, and David tensed, instantly prepared to pull Hope away. But instead of aggression, what followed was a moment of such profound, tender recognition that Jessica, who was filming the interaction with a shaky hand, found tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. Willow gently licked Hope's tiny head, her rough tongue smoothing the soft fur that human hands had kept clean, but that tragically lacked the essential scent markers of maternal grooming. Hope, seemingly energized by her mother's close presence, let out a weak, squeaky mew, the very first vocalization the dedicated staff had heard from the struggling kitten. "It's like a miracle," Jessica whispered, her voice choked with emotion, her heart overflowing with relief and joy. After allowing Willow to groom Hope for several precious minutes, David carefully placed the tiny kitten on the soft bedding near its siblings. The 4 healthy kittens, now with their bright eyes fully open and considerably more mobile than when they were first born, immediately noticed the newcomer. They approached with typical kitten curiosity, sniffing and gently pawing at their much smaller sibling. Willow supervised this initial introduction with truly impressive attentiveness, gently nudging away any kitten that became too boisterous and instinctively positioning her own body to create a protective barrier around the vulnerable Hope when the flurry of activity seemed overwhelming. "Look at that," Ethan marveled, his voice filled with awe and wonder. "She's not just accepting Hope. She's actively compensating for the size difference and her fragility." The first visit lasted only 20 short minutes, but its undeniable success completely transformed the mood at the reserve, replacing anxiety with a palpable sense of hope. Subsequent visits were gradually extended, always under careful supervision. With Hope returned to the safety and warmth of the incubator for essential rest periods and supplemental feeding. To everyone's immense delight, the tiny kitten began to show marked improvement, steadily gaining weight, displaying increased alertness, and developing stronger responses to stimuli. By the 4-week mark, a new, hopeful routine had been firmly established. Hope spent her mornings and evenings with Willow and her litter, receiving the vital socialization and comforting presence that only a mother and siblings could provide. Midday and overnight, the fragile kitten returned to the dedicated human care for supplemental feeding and close monitoring. It wasn't the ideal scenario, but it was undeniably working. Hope was not just surviving. She was beginning to truly thrive. "I think we're finally reaching the point where we need to make a firm decision about the surgery," David told Eleanor as they quietly observed Hope playing, still a little awkwardly but with increasing coordination, with one of her siblings during one of the supervised visits. "The palate issue isn't resolving on its own, as we had hoped it might with natural growth. But Hope is significantly stronger now. The risks associated with the surgery are considerably lower than they were just a few weeks ago." Eleanor watched the Bobcat family thoughtfully, her weathered face creased with both deep concern and a growing affection for the little fighter. "What does your instinct tell you, David?" she asked gently. The veterinarian considered the question carefully, his gaze fixed on the playful kittens. "That we're at a crucial window of opportunity. Hope is strong enough now to likely withstand the procedure, but still young enough that the healing process should be relatively rapid and complete. If we wait too much longer, we risk the defect becoming permanently established as her facial bones mature, and the potential separation from Willow and her litter during the recovery period is my primary concern. We've all seen how incredibly beneficial the family contact has been for her, Isolating Hope again, even temporarily, could be a significant emotional setback, even if the surgery itself is physically successful. Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes filled with understanding. Sometimes, in nature and in medicine, there are no perfect solutions, only the best guesses we can make with compassion and knowledge. I trust your judgment, David. The delicate surgery was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a highly respected specialist in veterinary craniofacial surgery from the Virginia Veterinary Teaching Hospital, graciously agreed to perform the procedure right at Hillside, bringing her invaluable expertise and specialized equipment to minimize the stress of travel for tiny Hope. The day before the surgery, the entire staff gathered for what they jokingly called Operation Hope's Last Supper, the final pre-surgery feeding and precious visit with Willow and her litter. The mood was a mixture of hopeful anticipation and nervous anxiety, with everyone acutely aware of the inherent risks involved in anesthetizing and operating on such a small and fragile creature. No pressure, David. Ethan told his friend that evening as they finished the final preparations for the next day, a nervous chuckle escaping his lips. But I think every single staff member, volunteer, and even our regular visitors is now emotionally invested in this incredible little cat. My own mother back in Pittsburgh asks for updates every single time we talk. David smiled wearily. Right, Ethan. No pressure at all. Just the hopes and dreams of an entire nature reserve riding on a delicate surgery on a 2-pound bobcat kitten. Surgery day dawned bright and clear, with a cheerful chorus of bird song greeting the early arrivals at the reserve. By 7 a.m., the small clinic had been meticulously transformed into a fully functional operating theater, with Dr. Reed methodically arranging her specialized instruments, while her skilled assistant carefully prepared the delicate anesthesia. We'll keep it short and focused, she assured David as they reviewed the pre-operative scans one last time, her voice calm and confident. 90 minutes maximum under anesthesia, with continuous, meticulous monitoring throughout the entire procedure. The surgery itself was a remarkable testament to the incredible capabilities of modern veterinary medicine. Using techniques skillfully adapted from human pediatric surgery, Dr. Reed meticulously repaired the structural defects in Hope's tiny palate and jaw, her experienced hands steady and precise as she worked on an area smaller than a postage stamp. David, carefully assisting with the anesthesia and vital signs monitoring, found himself holding his breath at several critical moments, releasing it only when Dr. Reed's calm voice announced, "That went precisely as planned. Excellent tissue approximation. I'm very optimistic about a full functional recovery." The immediate post-surgical period brought a new set of challenges. Hope needed to be strictly isolated, not just from her beloved mother and siblings, but from absolutely anything that might potentially damage the delicate surgical site. No toys, no rough surfaces, and certainly no enthusiastic siblings attempting to initiate playful wrestling matches. Jessica, drawing on her background in educational psychology, suggested a novel and heartwarming approach to maintaining the crucial mother-kitten bond during this forced separation, using a technique similar to those sometimes employed with human infants, too fragile for direct physical contact. She set up a scent exchange system. Soft cloths were gently placed with Willow and her healthy kittens for several hours, allowing them to absorb their unique scents. These cloths were then carefully positioned near Hope's recovery enclosure. Similarly, cloths that had been in close contact with Hope were introduced into Willow's den, keeping the absent kitten's scent fresh and familiar within the family's awareness. Whether it was due to this innovative and thoughtful approach or simply Willow's truly remarkable maternal instinct, the devoted bobcat mother continued to show a deep and unwavering interest in her absent offspring, often spending significant amounts of time near the clinic building where Hope was slowly recovering, her behavior clearly suggesting an awareness that transcended mere physical proximity. The 2 long weeks of Hope's recovery felt agonizingly slow to the humans involved, each day filled with a mixture of hope and anxious anticipation. But finally, the day they had all been praying for arrived. Dr. Reed, after a thorough and careful examination of Hope's surgical site, pronounced it sufficiently healed for a cautious reintroduction to her family. "Remember," she cautioned, her voice gentle but firm, "no rough play, and we still need to supplement with bottle feeding for at least another few weeks. The repair looks excellent, but we want to give it every possible chance to strengthen fully before it's tested by normal, boisterous kitten activities." The reintroduction was planned with the same meticulous care and attention to detail as the original separation, but with one significant and wonderful difference. This time, the entire team was quietly confident of success. They had all witnessed Willow's extraordinary adaptability and incredible patience. Her innate ability to modulate her own behavior and that of her other kittens to accommodate Hope's very special needs. Their collective confidence was beautifully rewarded when Hope, still noticeably smaller than her siblings, but now alert, vocal, and clearly eager for interaction, was gently brought back to the familiar enclosure. Willow greeted her returned kitten with the same gentle, loving attention she had shown before. The siblings, now 7 weeks old and considerably more coordinated in their playful antics, approached their returned littermate with what almost seemed like genuine recognition, their usual rough-and-tumble games noticeably gentler whenever Hope was involved. "It's as if they understand," Eleanor remarked, watching the reunited family through misty eyes, her voice filled with emotion. "As if they instinctively know this one needs special handling." While David's scientific training made him understandably cautious about attributing human-like understanding to the bobcat's behavior, even he had to readily admit that there was something truly remarkable, something almost magical, about the complex social dynamics within Willow's unusual and inspiring family. Over the following weeks, Hope's progress accelerated dramatically. The tiny kitten began to nurse more effectively, though supplemental bottle feeding continued as a necessary precaution. Play sessions with her siblings grew longer and more vigorous, with Hope displaying increasing coordination and strength with each passing day. Most encouraging of all, her vocalizations, which had once been weak and infrequent, became robust and communicative, clear evidence that the delicate surgical repair had successfully restored not just the essential structure, but also the vital function. By the time the kittens reached the 3-month mark, an untrained observer would have had considerable difficulty identifying Hope from her healthy siblings. Though still slightly smaller, the once incredibly fragile kitten now bounded across the enclosure with the same exuberant energy as the others, scaling the climbing structures with surprising agility, pouncing playfully on enrichment toys and occasionally testing Willow's considerable patience with typical kitten boundary pushing. "I think we can officially call this an incredible success story," or Tippets, David announced to his colleagues during their regular case review meeting, a broad smile lighting up his face. "All developmental milestones are being met, and the latest scans show complete healing of the surgical site, with excellent functional outcomes." The heartwarming story of Willow and Hope might have remained a private triumph, known only to those directly involved in their care, had it not been for a fortuitous connection. Jessica's cousin, a talented producer for a popular wildlife documentary series, happened to visit the reserve during Hope's remarkable recovery and was utterly captivated by the unfolding drama. With Eleanor's cautious approval, a small, respectful film crew was permitted to carefully document the Bobcat family, with strict protocols firmly in place to minimize any potential disturbance. The resulting short film, beautifully titled Willow's Wish, A Mother's Love and Modern Medicine, aired as part of a series on inspiring wildlife rehabilitation successes across America. The public response was absolutely overwhelming. Viewers were deeply moved by the powerful combination of Willow's remarkable maternal instinct, Hope's incredible fighting spirit, and the dedicated, compassionate care provided by the entire Hillside Nature Reserve staff. Donations poured in, allowing Hillside to significantly expand its rehabilitation facilities and vital educational programs. More importantly, the inspiring story sparked meaningful conversations nationwide about the delicate balance between essential conservation intervention and profound respect for wildlife's innate resilience. For the dedicated staff who had lived through the intense, emotionally charged weeks of Hope's initial struggle and her long, arduous recovery, the broader impact of their work was deeply gratifying, but ultimately secondary to the simple daily joy of watching the Bobcat family thrive. Each small but significant milestone, Hope's first successful solo hunt of the enrichment prey items, the kitten's confident exploration of new areas of the enclosure, the gradual transition from her mother's nourishing milk to solid food, was celebrated as a hard-won victory. I keep thinking about how incredibly close we came to losing this precious little one, Ethan remarked to David one quiet evening as they completed their final checks before closing the reserve for the night. The Bobcat family was curled together in a contented pile. 5 beautifully spotted forms nestled against Willow's tawny side, their synchronized breathing visible even in the soft, fading twilight. David nodded thoughtfully, his gaze filled with a quiet sense of wonder. In the wild, Hope simply wouldn't have survived. That's the stark reality of natural selection. But here, he paused, his eyes softening as he watched one of the kittens. Hope, he was almost certain, shift her small position, stretching a tiny paw across her mother's flank in a gesture of unconscious trust. Here, we had the privilege of intervention, he continued, his voice low and reflective. Not to override nature's course, but to gently support it through a particularly rough patch. The incredible resilience, the remarkable healing, the beautiful adaptation, that was all Willow and Hope. We simply created the safe conditions where it could happen. Ethan smiled, a deep understanding of his mentor's words settling within him. Balance, he said simply, acknowledging the delicate tightrope walk they often navigated. Finding that perfect balance between doing too much and doing too little. Exactly. David agreed, a knowing smile gracing his lips. And sometimes, when we manage to get that delicate balance just right, we are truly privileged to witness something absolutely extraordinary. As if in gentle agreement, Willow opened her striking amber eyes briefly, her gaze meeting the humans before she blinked slowly. That quintessential feline gesture of deep contentment and unwavering trust. And then returned to her peaceful slumber, surrounded by the family that had defied seemingly insurmountable odds through a powerful combination of natural resilience and compassionate human intervention. In the soft, fading evening light, with the ancient forest whispering its timeless songs all around them, it was impossible not to feel that they had been part of something truly profound. A small but significant miracle of connection that beautifully transcended the traditional boundaries between wild and tame, between dedicated human care and powerful animal instinct. It was a powerful reminder of what is truly possible when science, unwavering compassion, and deep respect for the incredible power of wildlife work harmoniously together, creating a vital space for healing and growth against seemingly impossible odds. And as David and Ethan quietly departed, leaving the precious Bobcat family to their well-earned rest, they carried with them not just a profound sense of professional satisfaction, but something much deeper. A renewed sense of purpose and a profound gratitude for having been allowed, however briefly, to participate in the truly remarkable journey of Willow and her 5 precious cubs. A valuable lesson. This incredible story beautifully illustrates the remarkable resilience of nature and the profound impact that compassionate intervention can have. It reminds us that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, the power of a mother's love and the dedication of caring individuals can create miracles. Now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Willow and Hope's journey touched you the most? Please share your comments below. Also, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button for more amazing wildlife stories.